Sophia becomes a feminine principle, divine human principle within the Godhead that is manifest in various different forms, uncreated and created. So manifest in the persons of the Trinity, manifest in the Mother of God, St. John the Baptist, the saints, even in us to some extent. Sophia, of course, is the Greek word for wisdom. There's a lot about wisdom in the Bible. If you look at Proverbs 8, you have this rather intriguing feminine figure involved in God's work of creation. And of course, in 1 Corinthians, you have the clear identification by St. Paul of Christ as that pre-existent wisdom. So wisdom's always been an important part of Christian theology. What the Sophiologists do is to take some of this biblical data, but also mix it up, frankly, with quite a lot of other stuff. So a lot of speculations about wisdom coming from fairly esoteric traditions that percolated into Russia in the 18th, 19th centuries. So to cut a long story short, in people like Solovyov, Florensky, to some extent Bulgakov even, Sophia becomes a feminine principle, divine human principle within the Godhead that is manifest in various different forms, both uncreated and created. So manifest in the persons of the Trinity, manifest in the Mother of God, St. John the Baptist, the saints, even in us to some extent. So she has two sides, uncreated and created. So she's somehow pre-primal to the divinity. So there's a kind of fundamental union between God and the world, even before the creation. Now, that to me is not consistent with Orthodox tradition. At the same time, the reaction to Sophiology has tended to close down any real conversation about Sophia. So my work on wisdom in the patristic tradition has tried to look at what a patristic Sophiology does actually look like, and particularly a Palamite Sophiology. And it seems to me that we can say a lot about Sophia in terms of God as wisdom, the three persons as wisdom, particularly the second person of the Trinity as wisdom. But people like St. Irenaeus, for example, talk of the Holy Spirit as wisdom too. We can also speak about God's self-giving energy, manifestation, revelation as wisdom. So in fact, we can talk about wisdom in terms of ousia, hypostasis, and energia, essence, hypostasis, and energy. What we cannot do is talk about wisdom as something that doesn't fit in there, that isn't created or uncreated. So what I try and do, in my own particular way, is to reorient Bulgakov's Sophiology, saying yes, up to a point, but also no in some very significant ways. So we can, I think, articulate a patristic and especially a Palamite Sophiology, and Bulgakov was very interested in Palamas. In fact, he says that when the Orthodox Church accepted Palamite theology, Council of 1351, it set itself on a road to accepting Sophiology. Well, I don't accept that. At the same time, I think there's more to patristic and Palamite Sophiology than the enemies of modern Russian Sophiology often allow. So that's what I try and do in the book. And of course, every time we go to the Divine Liturgy, we hear Sophia or the wisdom. So, but what are we talking about? So that's what I've been trying to explain. Sophiology, it has to be said, is very popular in the theological word more broadly, but I would say more popular outside of the Orthodox Church. So people like Rowan Williams, Anglican theologian, or John Milbank, or perhaps amongst the Orthodox David Bentley Hart. There's a lot of interest in Bulgakov, and he's been experiencing something of a renaissance with a lot of English translations in particular coming out. But one of the things I wanted to do in this work on Sophiology is to try and break down a kind of clear, another dichotomy, Russian religious thought, neo-patristics. It seems to me that the idea that Russian religious thought is all about engaging with modernity and so forth, whereas neo-patristics is just retreating into the past, totally wrong. So if you look at Florensky, as I was saying regarding the theology of history, he's engaging with the whole Western intellectual tradition, absolutely. And Bulgakov is deeply traditional in many ways. So I think we need to move beyond an easy dichotomy again between Russian religious thought and neo-patristics. So I'm trying to produce my own sort of synthesis, if you like, in my work on the divine wisdom. So seeing what is positive about Bulgakov's thought, accepting much of the neo-patristic critique, but showing there is more to patristic Sophiology than the opposition to Russian Sophiology has tended to affirm. And in fact, that the neo-patristic current can be just as up-to-date, just as engaged with the modern world as the Sophiological current. But I wouldn't say that Sophiology is very popular in the Orthodox world today.